So, we've been seeing this a lot recently where agents will work it into the contract where they are waiving inspections,
Yeah.
which I guess it's their prerogative,
Yep.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
we wouldn't recommend it
We wouldn't.
necessarily, but that's fine.
Correct.
But it's interesting because we're also seeing that they're waiving the appraisal, but
Yeah.
that's not really something that a borrower or a agent can do. Right?
Correct. So there's two parts to that, and with the inspection, we'll hit that quickly for a minute. Obviously you want to protect yourself, and that's more the real estate agent's lane. But you definitely want to protect yourself. You want to make sure the house is not going to fall off its foundation,
Or have a leaking oil tank,
or
for
have a leaking
example.
oil tank, right? Something like that. Yeah.
Sorry. Sorry.
I thought I was going to get through without laughing, but I couldn't.
Yeah. Nailed it.
So in regards to us as a lender, Total Mortgage, we don't require a copy of the home inspection. Some banks out there do require. I know some of the big banks will require a copy of the home inspection. So before you waive that, make sure your lender is okay with that.
Okay.
So on the appraisal idea, because this market is so competitive, a lot of people who are doing larger down payments are waiving.
Yeah. Waivin'. No, we're from sale.
Waiving.
Oh.
Oh my God, I don't know if I'm gonna...
Sorry, I don't know. Yeah, we're silly today.
Because this market is so competitive, a lot of
don't look at me.
Mom, he's looking at me. I don't know how my parents got through having 5 of us at the dinner table every night. Okay, so we know this market is competitive. It's been crazy competitive for over 2 years now. So one of the things buyers are doing is they're waiving their appraisal. They're not actually waiving the appraisal itself. They're just saying, you know what, if the value on the appraisal doesn't come in at the purchase price, I'm okay with that. I'm putting a whole bunch of money down, so it's not going to affect my financing. And I'm going to live in this house for the next 30 years. So if it underappraises a little bit, I really don't care. I need a place to live. So I'm on my real estate contract putting on there waive appraisal. Don't care what it appraises at. Again, they want to have a conversation with their agent. What if they're buying a $300,000 house and it only appraises at $200,000? It's probably not going to happen, but maybe have some sort of minimum that it at least has to appraise for. Conversation with your agent, just protect yourself.
Because not to interrupt you, because
Yeah.
if they buy at 300 and it appraises at 200, don't they have to come up with the extra $100,000?
They would potentially have to come up with the extra
Yeah.
money, depending on how much they were planning on putting down,
Okay.
depending on how that affects their financing. If they were at $300,000 purchase price and they were putting 50% down and it appraised at $250,000, it's not changing their financing. It's
see.
about that financing. Was I applying for 20% or more down and it still has enough value where they still have that 20% equity, they're good.
I see.
If it's a client who is putting 5% down and it underappraises by 10%,
they have to come up with that.
They
extra
have to
5%.
come up with that extra percentage, yeah.
I see.
Because now the financing no longer works because you have to have equity in that property. You have to have down payment in that property. That is why a lot of offers right now will not get accepted with a small down payment. The sellers are worried it's not going to appraise and the deal's going to fall apart.
So you're saying waive the appraisal as long as you kind of write in there up to a certain amount to protect the buyers.
Yeah, if you're putting less amount down, definitely. If you're putting a huge amount down and you really don't care, then go for it. Do whatever you want. And people are doing whatever they want. And this market's so nutty. They don't care.
But all this doesn't mean that. So them appraising, waiving the appraisal doesn't mean we're not doing the appraisal.
Correct. So there's 2 parts to that. Yes, you can waive on your contract saying, I don't care what it appraises at. But that doesn't mean the lender isn't going to do an appraisal.
Right.
We still have to do an appraisal. We still have to see what that property's worth. We're protecting your interests. We're protecting our interests. Yes, if you're putting a big chunk down, again, it's not going to affect your financing, and that's because your interest is still protected in that property because you're putting a big chunk down. But just because you say, I'm good without an appraisal, that doesn't mean we're going to waive it.
Right.
There are situations where, everything we do is system generated. Everything is, all the information is put into a computer. And once all that system is in and the property address is put in, it'll spit back potentially an appraisal waiver. The system feels, 123 Main Street, you're buying it for X amount. Oh, you know what? That's a fair price based on all the information we've gathered over the past who knows how many years on properties and values. The system feels that's a good price you're paying for it. So there's really no reason to do an appraisal on it. So that's the lender waiving the appraisal. Two totally different things. It has to be, you have to be putting down a decent amount of money. Again, protecting everybody's interest. 20% down usually, investment property even more. You're never going to get it on an FHA. It's just not written into their system. It's going to be on a conventional. You'll sometimes on investment property. You'll never get it on a jumbo. But it's your conventional financing, $700,000 and less, with a decent down payment. It seems to be driven by credit scores as well. Good credit scores kind of makes sense. They want a nice sturdy file there. They don't want you to foreclose on it in a couple of years. And a down payment. But it's kind of neat. It's kind of fun. But to add on to that, just because we get an appraisal waiver doesn't mean you can't do one. A lot of people, I'm going to say maybe half, still want to do an appraisal.
They want to know
to make sure, right, to see where they're at. So we can always do that. Obviously, if you waive the appraisal, you're going to save yourself some money. Appraisals are $500 to $800 now, depending on the size of the house, multifamily or not. So it saves you a little bit of money if you don't do it. And again, it's not changing your financing, but a lot of people want that peace of mind that they haven't totally overpaid for their house.
So the thing that I like that you do is, even if we get the system generated appraisal waiver, you still like to collect that fee just in case.
Yeah. So we do collect the fee up front. That's the only fee we collect up front after the people have decided that they're going to move forward. They've signed their intent to proceed. We collect that appraisal fee. It kind of just gets tucked over there. If we end up not needing appraisal, it gets credited towards another closing cost at the time of closing. And every once in a while, the system will flip, I say, on you during the process for one reason or another. Maybe your assets, you just spent $50,000 of your assets. How much in assets now is when we first ran this scenario through and had that appraisal waiver. Now the system's kind of like, you know what? I'm not going to waive that appraisal anymore. We need that appraisal. So every once in a great while, maybe 1 in 50 will flip. So we do collect that up front. That way we're ready to go if we need to order it.
So if someone's buying a property using FHA financing and they're buying it as is, like what are the potential issues that would come up throughout the process?
Absolutely. And I've had plenty over the years where people are like, but it's as is. It doesn't really matter as far as the financing part of it if it says as is. FHA has a certain set of standards that are going to be reviewed as part of the appraisal process when the appraiser goes out. The house, they're looking for health and safety issues. They want to make sure somebody isn't going to get hurt when they go into that house, or a little kid's going to eat some paint off the ground or something like that. So usually an as is house does have issues with it. That's why they put as is on there. So if they're failing paint is the biggest one we always run across. The roof is leaking, missing railings. It doesn't matter if that contract says as is. FHA requires those things to be fixed prior to closing. It's just the way it is.
It's a government-backed loan. They're not gonna.
Correct. You're doing a low down payment. You potentially have lower credit score. Whatever the reason is, you're using FHA. So those repairs have to be fixed. It doesn't. We don't care who does it.
Yes.
It can be the buyer. It can be the seller. It can be the guy who lives down the street. We don't care who does it. But those items have to be rectified, no matter what your contract says. Seller will not fix anything. Again, doesn't matter. If the FHA appraisal comes in saying repairs are needed, they have to be done. So I think it's really important for real estate agents to know that, because newer agents don't realize that. They figure as is as is. That's the way it has to be purchased. The buyer will fix it after they move in. They're okay. The buyer's okay, with these issues. It doesn't matter. Do the repairs.
What is the appeal of waiving inspections? Why do people do that?
Yeah, so again, it's just a way to get an offer accepted. A seller's like, oh, cool, nothing's, they're not going to come back to me and ask me for, credit for inspection issues, or won't have to fix anything. It would worry me a little bit.
That's scary.
Like, are they hiding something on me? At least do it. A lot of times it looks right. A lot of times I can see the contracts are inspection for informational purposes only.
Yeah, what does that mean? We see that all the time.
Yeah, it just kind of means, I'm doing an inspection, but I don't have the right to come back around and say I want something fixed or credit for anything.
I see.
So you're just saying, yeah, we're going to do it. That way, if, the house is about to fall off the foundation, you're going to know it and not buy the house. But you're not going to go back and say, oh, this faucet leaks, I want a $5,000 credit.
Oh, so the buyer can still go back and say, we're backing out,
Yeah.
but they just can't ask for money.
Yeah, again, not quite our lane, but from what I see, yes, they're putting on there an inspection contingency date, and I believe they have until that date to go back to the seller and say, I'm out, there's issues with this house. We'll have to get a real estate agent in one day and go over those things, because that's hugely helpful.
Yes.
Because, I talk to a lot of borrowers, and they have no idea what's on their contract.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, I have one right now. I've asked her someone, I'm like, when's the closing date? She's like, I don't know. I'm like, well, do you have a copy of the contract? She's like, oh, is it on there? I'm like, yeah, it's on there. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, all this stuff is on your contract. It's a contract. So read it. Know what you're doing.
I mean, I get not reading the updated terms and agreements for like your cell phone plan, but you're buying a house.
You don't read that? Oh my God,
Do you?
I read that. Cover to cover, I read it.
15 pages.
No, I scroll down, click I agree, and sign my name. Done.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, at least know anything written in. I always tell people, anything written in, that's what you really want to focus on. All the rest is standard language.
Yeah.
That's there to, equally protect both sides. But if somebody writes something in, read it.
Yeah.
Pay attention
Protect
to it.
yourself.
Yeah.
Man. This is a huge purchase.
It is. And you don't want to find out, a couple days before closing, that something's totally different. I know one of the big ones now is the smoke detectors. I know the state put some sort of legislation, and I had somebody about a year ago was very mad at me because she thought the credit was coming from me, that the seller gives if you can't certify the smoke detectors are there. I'm like, this has nothing to do with me, and she got all mad at me. And, clearly it wasn't explained to her. So I know that stuff isn't always explained. A really good reason to make sure you go with an agent who has been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot.
And you might want to help out your neighbor who just got into real estate. And that's kind of you, but protect yourself.
It's a big dollar purchase. You definitely want to do some research. And obviously you and I work with agents all day long. We are always happy to match somebody up.
Mm-hmm.
We know personalities who would do good with who and stuff. So not only do we do mortgages, but we
do
matchmaking for real estate.
Yeah.